I want you to mentally transport yourself back to a very specific, slightly unsettling moment in the digital history of the early 2010s.
Okay.
This was when the internet started getting really good at knowing you. I mean, not just what you looked up, but, who you were.
That time,
Yeah.
it really felt like digital adolescence, didn't it? We were finally starting to understand that our search engine wasn't just a passive library.
Exactly.
It was an active participant in our lives.
Absolutely. Now, I want you to picture this intense real-world scene. It's 2010. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill is happening in the Gulf of Mexico.
Oh, I remember that. A total catastrophe.
A massive environmental catastrophe. I mean, you remember the images, oil-soaked birds, huge media coverage, just a world-changing disaster.
A singular, undeniable global event everyone was talking about.
Precisely. So you're sitting at a coffee shop with a friend, you both open up your laptops, you open your browser, and you decide to search for the exact same term, BP.
Okay.
Two different computers, same moment, same search term. You expect the same results, right?
Of course. That's what the internet was supposed to be. A shared, universal public library.
That's the foundational promise. Equal access to a shared reality. But here is the shock. Your screen, the one you're looking at, is just dominated by pages and pages of investment news.
Wait, what? Investment news.
BP stock prices, analysis of their corporate performance, advisories about long-term portfolio strategy, and maybe, just maybe, a small mention of cleanup costs buried 3 pages deep. For you, it's business as usual.
And, my friend, what did they see when they typed in BP?
Their screen is a cascade of environmental disaster. They see oil-covered beaches, regulatory investigations, catastrophic ecological reports, and activist calls for boycotts.
Wow.
2 strikingly different versions of reality delivered instantaneously from the exact same source. The crucial environmental news was literally hidden from you, but the investment news was front and center.
That is genuinely chilling. It sounds less like a universal library open to everyone, and much more like a highly curated lockdown vault. A vault designed specifically to cater to one narrow aspect of your life, your wallet, maybe your investment interest, and is intentionally sidelining your broader civic duty or, your environmental concerns.
That immediate, shocking variation in digital reality, based purely on the invisible digital breadcrumbs you had left behind in the weeks prior, is the core mystery we're diving into today.
Okay.
We are unpacking the invisible mechanism that controls what you see and what profound things it might be hiding from you.
And our mission today is crucial because we need to move beyond the moral panic that this realization initially triggered.
Right.
We're going to take the complex academic work, separate the dramatic theoretical threat from the rigorous empirical evidence, and figure out if this invisible mechanism, the algorithm, is merely an accidental threat eroding our shared reality.
Or, and this is where it gets really interesting, if in some surprising non-Western contexts, this mechanism might actually function as a necessary shield.
A shield, like a tool for survival. Ultimately, we want to explore what this digital double life means for you, for how you engage in civic life, how you decide what health information to trust, and even how you navigate the challenging, often contradictory information landscape of the modern world.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the concept that tries to explain why you were only shown stock prices and your friends saw the ecological disaster. That concept, the one that became the villain of the early 2010s, is the filter bubble.
It's a brilliant, evocative name coined by the internet activist Eli Pariser. But to understand it properly, we have to clarify its core mechanism and distinguish it from its closely related cousin, the echo chamber.
They are so often used interchangeably, but there's a critical difference in where the agency lies, right?
Exactly. The echo chamber traditionally focuses on human agency. That's when you are actively self-selecting.
So I'm building the walls myself.
You're building the walls yourself. You deliberately seek out like-minded communities, you follow people who share your ideology, and you actively build your own information silo. It's a conscious choice to seek affirmation.
So if I only follow football fanatics on social media and I block anyone who discusses chess, I am building an echo chamber of my own free will.
Yes. Whereas the filter bubble is distinct because its agency lies with the opaque algorithms. It's the situation where personalization, driven by these, invisible algorithmic rules and the preferences you previously expressed, shapes your online environment to align predominantly with your existing worldviews.
So you didn't consciously choose the bubble?
No. The platform built it around you without your explicit knowledge.
And Pariser detailed this mechanism of personalization almost like a simple three-step digital spy operation.
I like that. It's the mechanism of digital identity construction.
Yeah.
Step 1, the algorithm figures out who you are and what you like.
And how does it do that?
It achieves this staggering level of detail by tracking every conceivable digital trace you leave, all those persistent cookies, tracking beacons, deep packet inspection of your network activity, every click, every pause, every single item you linger on.
We're not just talking about what you type into a search bar. We're talking about a massive dossier, data that extends far beyond that, the speed of your mouse movement, the type of phone you use.
Your geographic location, your purchase history, even the time of day you log on, it's all in there.
And based on this ocean of granular data comes step 2.
Right. Step 2. The algorithm decides which parts of reality to show you. It's tasked to provide content that best fits you.
And best fit means what?
It means what will maximize your engagement. The simplest and most effective way to keep you engaged and seeing ads is to feed you what you already enjoy, what you agree with, or what confirms your existing view of the world.
And then step 3, the tuning phase. Tune it in to get the fit just right.
It's a constant, never-ending feedback loop. Your interaction with the suggested content provides even more data, refining the bubble every single millisecond. The result, as Pariser stated, is simple. Your identity shapes your media.
What's fascinating here, and kind of scary, is that the foundation of this entire system relies on data mining that can, and often does, inherit historical biases.
Absolutely. It's crucial to understand how algorithms learn bias in the first place, because the prejudice they show, it isn't born in the code.
It's born in the data we feed them.
Exactly.
Okay, let's clarify this with an analogy that makes the bias visible. We'll call this the data mining as biased weightlifting analogy.
I like the sound of that. Let's visualize it.
Imagine a sophisticated weightlifting machine, our AI, essentially, that needs to learn what constitutes a successful, strong athlete for its training programs. It uses data mining to ingest millions of historical records, and from that, it decides which data points are valuable.
And to those valuable points, it assigns a weight and importance score.
Exactly. So if the machine is trained exclusively using a data set composed of decades of records from heavy, strong men who historically dominated the sport,
then its historical data is already fundamentally skewed toward a male physique and a very specific demographic.
Precisely. Now, a woman applies to use this machine. The system starts assigning negative or low weight to any input associated with woman.
How so?
If her profile mentions attending a women's college or participation in a women's sports league, the AI penalizes that data point.
Why?
Because historically, in its skewed data set, those characteristics weren't correlated with its definition of a successful athlete.
That is deeply alarming, because that data mining bias isn't a theory, it's documented reality. That's precisely what happened with Amazon's CV selection algorithm in 2014.
Right, tell us about that.
It was trained on 10 years of historical hiring data from Amazon. And since the tech industry, especially Amazon's technical roles, was heavily male-dominated, we're talking maybe 75% men, the algorithm learned that being male was a necessary characteristic for success.
And the automated result was what?
The algorithm started penalizing CVs that contained the word woman, or references to women's groups, like captain of the women's chess club. It was systematically discriminating against female applicants.
Wow. So it's automated, institutionalized prejudice made invisible by lines of code.
And this is why the stakes, according to critics, are so incredibly high. They argue the filter bubble leads to the erosion of public life.
Because when we are constantly exposed only to what reinforces our beliefs, we become highly susceptible to confirmation bias and misinformation.
Which, as we saw after the concept became popular, they argue exacerbates societal polarization and deepens ideological segregation, fundamentally hindering the kind of diverse discourse that's necessary for a functional democracy.
We saw these concerns directly linked to significant real-world occurrences, didn't we?
Oh, absolutely. Think of the widespread dissemination of false information during the Brexit referendum, the 2016 U.S. election, anti-immigration protests that flared up across Europe.
And even, I remember this, the startling resurgence of diseases like measles between 2014 and 2015, where misinformation about vaccines just proliferated within these segregated digital communities.
It transitions from being a theoretical risk to what some scholars have started calling algorithmic violence.
Algorithmic violence, that's a strong term.
The term captures the severity because it refers to non-physical systemic harm. It's when an algorithmic decision prevents people from meeting basic human needs, like a fair shot at a job, as with the Amazon CV case, or perhaps even a just trial.
You're talking about the use of predictive tools in the U.S. court system, like the COMPAS tool.
Yes, the Correctional Offender Management Profiling for Alternative Sanctions, or COMPAS. This is a machine learning model used by some U.S. courts. It provides a recidivism risk score for defendants.
Meaning it predicts how likely they are to reoffend if they're released.
Exactly.
And that score directly impacts the life of the defendant. A high-risk score means a defendant is far more likely to be imprisoned while awaiting sentencing, regardless of the final ruling.
Because officials fear they are a flight risk or a danger. The score heavily influences the official's decision.
So what's the problem with it?
And here's the insidious part. The company that created COMPAS, Equivent, claimed they didn't use race as an input factor. However, ProPublica did a study of defendants in Broward County, Florida, and found that Black individuals were far more likely to be classified as high risk.
What were the actual numbers? How bad was it?
It was shocking. Black people who did not reoffend were found to be twice as likely to be classified as high risk compared to white people in the same situation.
Twice as likely.
And conversely, white people who did reoffend were more likely to be classified as low risk. The system was profoundly biased.
But wait, hang on. If they didn't input race, how did the bias creep in? It has to come back to your data mining analogy.
It does. The algorithm used proxy variables.
Proxy variables.
Think of proxies as stand-ins for protected characteristics.
Yeah.
While the algorithm didn't ingest race, it ingested historical data points that are strongly correlated with race and systemic inequality.
Like what?
Things like zip codes, historical poverty levels in a neighborhood, or previous low-level arrests that didn't even lead to a conviction.
So the model simply uses historical data, which is already steeped in generations of discriminatory policing and court sentences, and uses those proxies to perpetuate and automate institutionalized racism.
And it delegates the moral responsibility away from the human decision-makers. It sounds like the theoretical stakes for democracy, fairness, and human rights could not be higher.
That's where the conversation sat for years. The algorithms are biased, they are powerful, and they are isolating us, leading to polarization and systemic violence.
Pretty grim picture.
So for years, the narrative was one of imminent digital doom. The filter bubble was framed as this universal prison of personalization that was eating away at shared civic reality. This created what academics call a moral panic.
Right, a huge, dramatic public perception that this new technology was just destroying society. But here's the twist in our story. This narrative inspired researchers across the globe to launch a massive academic quest.
Yeah, what was the quest?
Prove the filter bubble. Find the walls. Quantify the isolation. Go out and find the evidence.
And what did the quest find?
Well, this is the core contradiction of this entire deep dive. The strong majority of empirical research finds the filter bubble hypothesis is actually overstated.
Wait, hold on a second.
It often looks more like a leaky net than an impenetrable wall.
We just spent 10 minutes detailing the catastrophic harm of algorithmic bias. Are you telling me that all the panic about Brexit and elections and polarization, while real, wasn't actually caused primarily by this bubble mechanism?
The evidence suggests that yes, the initial theory of universal ideological isolation by platforms themselves was too strong.
Really?
Studies conducted in the UK, the US, and many European countries have consistently found that platforms generally lead to a slightly more diverse news consumption pattern.
More diverse.
More diverse, which is the direct opposite of what the filter bubble hypothesis posits.
That is genuinely shocking. So if the algorithm is constantly trying to optimize for my current views, what mechanisms are actively injecting diversity into my feed?
There are two primary drivers of digital diversity, and they both leverage the inherent chaos and the multifunctionality of these large platforms. The first is incidental exposure.
Incidental exposure, that sounds exactly like what happens when I'm checking sports scores and end up accidentally reading a global affairs article.
It is precisely that accidental stumbling. You log onto a massive social media site, let's use Instagram or Facebook, not because you're looking for a sober-minded investigative report on economics, but because you want to check on a friend's vacation photos.
Or you're just scrolling through cat videos or looking for some specific niche humor.
We're scrolling for junk food.
Right.
But while you're there, performing a non-news function, the feed slips in a news article that a distant relative shared or that a community group posted, which you would never have actively sought out directly. This accidental low-effort exposure increases your overall news repertoire diversity, especially for those who rarely visit dedicated news sites.
So social media is diversifying our information diet by making us browse for entertainment and then inadvertently slipping some vitamins onto the plate while we're not paying attention.
That's the perfect description. And the second mechanism is automated serendipity. This is most evident in search engines. The algorithm is commercially motivated to provide variety.
How does variety make money? I don't get that part.
Well, search engines want to solve your problem quickly, but they also want you to feel satisfied with the comprehensiveness of the results. If you search for something like sustainable energy policy, the engine will return results from a range of sources. Think a left-leaning environmental group, a right-leaning business journal, and perhaps a university research paper.
Even if I normally only click on environmental sources, it knows my history.
Yes. The system returns results from sources you don't normally access, creating an experience of variety that is beneficial for the platform's reputation as a balanced index.
So you feel like you found something new and interesting.
A sense of variety that was engineered all along.
So the system is designed to provide some diversity, to keep the user experience from being stale, and to appear comprehensive. And the net effect is diversification against the bubble hypothesis.
And crucially, researchers found that while algorithms might limit diversity somewhat, the single biggest driver of informational isolation is actually user choice. People are opting into their own information silos.
So the biggest filter is actually the one between my ears. The bubble isn't made purely of opaque code. It's made of willful psychological selection.
In a majority of democratic contexts, yes. Let's look at the Facebook data. When Facebook's algorithm shows users politically cross-cutting content, that is, content that goes against their ideology, it successfully reduces their exposure to their own viewpoint by a small percentage.
Okay, so it works a little.
It works a little. However, the users themselves still actively decrease the likelihood of clicking on that opposing link.
It's a digital knee-jerk reaction. Discomfort detected. Abort mission.
Exactly. One study showed users were 17% less likely to click on opposing views if they were conservative and 6% less likely if they were liberal.
So it's happening on both sides.
It's happening on both sides. Yeah. And the reality is that the deeply polarized fringe, the people exclusively getting news from partisan sources, is a very small minority.
Really? It feels so much bigger.
It's often just a few percent, even in highly polarized countries like the U.S. Most people have diverse media diets. The real problem isn't the average user being trapped. It's the highly partisan fringe actively seeking isolation.
But if the algorithms aren't always trapping us in the ideological sense, what are they doing that causes so much trouble? We know they prioritize engagement. How does that prioritization become the actual immediate problem?
That is the core of the modern algorithmic dilemma. The algorithms optimize for engagement metrics like watch time, click rates, and shares over objectives like diversity, accuracy, or civic value. This optimization bias fundamentally shapes the content landscape.
Okay, let's use another analogy for this one. Let's call this the instant noodle algorithm dilemma.
Perfect. An algorithm optimized purely for immediate engagement is like a food vendor who knows that you will always choose instant noodles.
Why? Why do I always choose instant noodles?
Because they provide immediate gratification. They are quick to click on, quick to consume, and they provide an immediate, emotionally satisfying hit.
So they know a quick, salty hit of emotionally charged, sensationalist content, anger, fear, outrage, will keep me scrolling longer than a complex, balanced meal of rigorous investigative journalism or nuanced perspective.
Exactly. And by favoring these metrics, the algorithm intensifies the spread of content that goes viral, even if it lacks factual accuracy. Conspiracy theories or exaggerated outrage generating more hits and shares compared to sober analysis. The algorithm is essentially rewarding high-calorie, low-nutrition information.
And this leads us to the surprising research on Bilibili.
Right.
This is a massive Chinese online video platform relying heavily on personalization. If the filter bubble theory holds, these users should be the most isolated, right?
That's what they assumed. The researchers looked specifically at Bilibili's heavy users, those with high activity and high fragmentation.
Can you define high fragmentation in simple terms for us?
High fragmentation means they switch topics frequently. They might watch a video about ancient Chinese history, then immediately switch to a tutorial on video game development, then watch a clip of a concert.
So they're active but scattered.
Exactly. Their interests are all over the place. And the researchers found that these heavy users, operating in a highly personalized system, fail to fall into filter bubbles.
What?
In fact, they demonstrated more diverse consumption patterns than low-activity users.
That blows the whole deep filter bubble theory wide open, especially in high-choice environments. The more actively and variedly you engage with the platform, the more diverse your information becomes.
That was the conclusion. It suggests that high-choice media environments, combined with high user activity, might be fundamentally counteracting the simple ideological isolation model. The extent of the filter bubble may be significantly overstated when users are active and browse widely.
We've established that the filter bubble, as originally conceived in the West, this universal prison of personalized information, is largely a myth. In many cases, platforms accidentally boost diversity, and the real isolation comes from user choice.
Right.
But now we move to the most counterintuitive discovery of our deep dive. The idea that sometimes the filter bubble is actually a good and necessary thing.
This is the concept of the protective bubble, and it forces us to challenge the Western centrism that has defined the entire debate.
Explain that. What do you mean by Western centrism?
Most of these early studies, they assume a democratic baseline of information freedom and a lack of government restriction.
Okay, that makes sense.
In those environments, the filter bubble is seen as a threat to public discourse. But if you shift your focus to countries with low press freedom, high government surveillance, or authoritarian rule, personalization takes on a completely different, positive survival function.
So digital isolation stops being an accidental threat to democracy and starts being a necessary shield against tyranny or hate speech?
Precisely. Let's look at case study 1. China's LGBTQ+ community using the platform Zhihu.
Okay.
In a country where censorship and social stigma are very serious concerns, how does the algorithm factor into their daily life?
What did the research on Zhihu reveal about how the users perceive the algorithm?
Users developed what are called folk theories about the system. They perceive the algorithm as having two roles. First, the evictor role,
The evictor.
sidelining, disorganizing, and defaming content related to their identity if it became too visible to the mainstream, which is bad for visibility and rights.
That's the censorship function we would expect.
But the second role was the protector. The algorithm was seen as shielding them, recognizing their specific needs, and fostering exclusive private networks.
So wait, by personalizing their feed, the algorithm essentially created a safe, contained space?
Exactly. A space where they could participate in discussions, seek advice, and affirm their identity away from mainstream scrutiny, hate speech, or potential government interference.
That is a stunning reversal. The very mechanism designed to narrow their view also serves as a digital refuge, allowing identity to flourish in a hostile environment.
It flips the script entirely. The bubble becomes a necessary safe room. And case study 2 provides a similar pattern, but in a political context. Kenya.
Kenya has a history of media censorship and deep citizen surveillance, a significant carryover from previous authoritarian rule.
That's the key context. Studies show that closed, encrypted WhatsApp groups in Kenya have become absolutely critical for political participation. The privacy inherent to these enclosed digital structures acts as a shield against the state.
Because what you post in a private encrypted group is much harder for the government to track and use against you.
Yes. Political bloggers who are perceived to be anti-establishment and post on public platforms like Twitter or Facebook are frequently arrested and charged.
But that doesn't happen on WhatsApp.
Significantly fewer accountable arrests have been made in connection to WhatsApp activities, despite government threats. The closed nature acts as a protective shield, enabling citizens to participate politically without fear of immediate state monitoring.
So, in these non-democratic contexts, the narrowing of information exposure and the move into private walled gardens isn't a failure of democracy.
It's a fundamental survival mechanism against state oppression.
It transitions from being a theoretical political problem to a fundamental safety measure.
And we can connect this protective bubble idea back to the individual psyche, because even in the West, the filter bubble is not just technological, it was also epistemic.
Epistemic. What do you mean by that?
Meaning it's already deeply rooted in how we understand and process knowledge.
So the bubble in my mind influences how I react to the bubble on my screen, even if the algorithm tries to break me out of it.
Exactly. Researchers study the concept of epistemic discomfort. This is the genuine psychological pain or resistance people feel when their deeply held knowledge, beliefs, or identity are directly and aggressively challenged.
And online environments are the perfect breeding ground for epistemic discomfort, primarily because of something called context collapse.
Context collapse is the social nightmare of the modern feed. All your different social roles, your family members, your coworkers, your high school crush, political rivals, strangers, your spiritual leader, are mixed into one singular, unmediated stream.
Right. The feed is this chaotic mess of competing, often aggressive worldviews.
And when you experience that kind of collapse, opposing views are presented too quickly, too aggressively, and crucially, often without the necessary social context or mediation. You see a deeply partisan meme from a distant relative right next to a professional update from your boss.
So the opposing opinion just lands, raw and unmediated, right next to your cat video, or worse, right next to something you hold dear.
And the outcome of this unmediated exposure to contradiction isn't open-mindedness. It often leads to what researchers call a disagreement reinforcement mechanism. The sheer volume and speed of contradictory perspectives trigger profound epistemic discomfort.
So instead of engaging critically, my brain defaults to a survival mode. It's too much chaos, too much discomfort, so I instinctively think, this feed is unreliable, hostile, or chaotic, so I'm going to retreat and double down on the one thing I know to be true, my own pre-existing belief.
That's the essence of the psychological retreat. Your outstanding current beliefs becomes a comfortable normative guide. Sticking to your guns feels like the most rational and least unpleasant course of action. Because, in the chaotic online world, your existing knowledge feels like the only reliable reference point.
So the strongest filter bubble of all is the one you already carry around in your mind.
And the algorithm is just helping you make the retreat easier.
This has been a fascinating journey, moving from the myth of the universal prison to the reality of self-selection and the discovery of the protective function of isolation. But we still have a real problem.
Right. Algorithmic violence is real, and the engagement trap is polarizing.
So now we have to talk about the practical path forward. Designing a better digital future. The solutions must be integrated. We need action on two critical fronts: user empowerment and aggressive system redesign.
Let's start with the user. If the biggest driver of isolation is user choice, then digital literacy has to be the first line of defense. But how do we teach people to fight invisible algorithms?
Right. What does that even look like?
Digital literacy needs to move beyond simply identifying fake news. It must become proactive. Savvy users must actively engage to diversify content by becoming what we might call algorithm antagonists.
How do I become an algorithm antagonist? Give me the manual.
First, you must deliberately follow accounts with differing viewpoints and ideological stances, even if you hate the content. Clicking on it occasionally and engaging thoughtfully signals broader interest to the algorithm, forcing it to diversify your feed.
And second?
Second, use non-personalized search tools occasionally, or log out of your primary browser before a major search, just to see what the unpersonalized version of reality looks like.
It's the constant act of questioning the digital mirror, knowing that the content you're seeing isn't random, but filtered by design. That awareness is the first step out of the psychological bubble.
And that leads directly to system redesign, because filter bubbles and the engagement trap are not inevitable byproducts of the internet. They are a design choice driven by business objectives.
So how do we force these immense platforms to make better design choices when their entire economic model is built on engagement?
We need to change the optimization goal. They currently prioritize metrics like watch time and click rates. We need platforms to incorporate diversity metrics and randomization strategies into their recommender systems.
We need multi-objective optimization.
Exactly. We need algorithms engineered to balance Objective A, personalization and engagement, with Objective B, diversification and factual accuracy. This is a complex engineering challenge because you have to decide how much weight to give to each objective.
So what does a diversification metric practically look like? How does the code measure diversity?
It measures things like source ownership diversity, ideological distance between the sources recommended, and the geographical origin of the content. For example, if you read 3 articles from a strongly liberal source, the algorithm might be programmed to force the next 2 suggested articles to come from a neutrally rated or center-right source, even if your click history suggests otherwise.
That is transparency and explainability in action. Users should understand why an item is recommended, even if it feels jarring. It's critical to giving users back a sense of control and mitigating the bubble's negative impact.
But here we hit the wall of scale. The harm caused by algorithmic bias, as we saw with COMPAS and Amazon, is transnational. Can we really trust corporate ethics and voluntary redesign to solve a problem that spans continents and affects global elections?
That raises the need for the most radical proposal, an independent transnational body to regulate AI bias and harm, the AI regulator.
drawing direct inspiration from the pharmaceutical industry. The analogy is powerful because the damage from a major AI error is transnational. Google, Amazon, Facebook, their failures impact the whole planet simultaneously.
And most of the global population, especially those in vulnerable communities, lacks the expertise or awareness to fight harms like unfair job exclusion or undeserved incarceration from a biased tool like COMPAS.
We wouldn't let an untested drug hit the market without rigorous clinical trials and regulatory approval, would we? We establish standards of safety.
No way. The US FDA or the UK HMRA ensures new medicine is safe before deployment, testing for side effects and efficacy.
Precisely. We need an equivalent organization, let's call it the International Artificial Intelligence Organization, or IAIO, to guarantee safe, trustworthy AI models. There is no moral justification for allowing a machine learning model to be deployed at scale if it inflicts systemic harm on millions of people.
And what gives this body the power, the teeth, to enforce these rules against trillion-dollar global tech giants?
It needs legally binding power, and the enforcement mechanism needs to impose fines based on a percentage of the company's turnover, not its profit.
That distinction is critical. Why turnover and not profit? That sounds like a legal nuance that needs explaining for our listeners.
It's not just a nuance. It's the difference between a slap on the wrist and a real deterrent. International companies are incredibly skilled at devising complex accounting mechanisms to legally avoid tax, often using sophisticated practices like transfer pricing and offshore entities.
So they can make their taxable profit look tiny.
They can drastically shrink their apparent profit through legal means. So if you find them based on profit, they can simply move the money around and make the fine seem minuscule compared to their overall operation.
But a fine based on turnover.
Their gross revenue is much harder to hide or manipulate. It acts as a genuine, globally effective deterrent against algorithmic violence, ensuring that data ethics is the core principle of development, because the penalty for deploying a harmful system is economically existential.
That brings us full circle to the core warning. The reproduction of harmful ideas is particularly dangerous now that AI has moved from being an experimental discipline in labs to being tested at scale on billions of people. We have the technology and the awareness to mitigate this.
And data ethics must be the core principle. We know, based on the history of environmental threats like climate change, that simply providing the evidence of harm is insufficient to modify behavior by massive companies. Proactive, powerful, and globally enforceable regulation is necessary.
So what does this all mean for you, the person interacting with the screen every day? We've learned that the digital world is far more complex than the simple bubble metaphor suggests. Sometimes the algorithm is protecting vulnerable groups. Often it's just prioritizing the quickest route to profit.
The ultimate digital challenge is realizing that the fight for diverse information isn't just about what the algorithm shows you. It is about whether you will allow your own mind, driven by that powerful innate desire to avoid epistemic discomfort, to be the strongest filter of all, or if you will actively choose the discomfort of contradiction, the difficult choice of clicking on that slightly challenging article and engage with the world outside the self-imposed safety of your own knowledge.
That was a true deep dive into the algorithmic shield. We dissected the filter bubble's myth versus its reality, discovering that platforms often encourage incidental diversity, but only because they prioritize the instant gratification of engagement.
But we also unveiled the essential, vital role of the protective bubble in surveillance societies, offering marginalized groups a necessary refuge from hate and authoritarian surveillance, fundamentally challenging our Western assumptions about digital isolation.
And finally, we looked at the future. The integrated solution requiring both active user digital literacy, becoming that algorithm antagonist, and the global necessity for transnational regulatory bodies that treat biased AI with the same rigor and regulatory power we apply to new untested medicines.
So, our parting advice to you, take that lesson about epistemic discomfort seriously. Today, deliberately seek out contradictory contents. Click on that article you reflexively want to scroll past. That small act of seeking contradiction is your best, most powerful defense against the filters, both on the screen and in your mind.